I walked into my boss's office on a Tuesday morning like I had 1,000 times before. She was sitting on his desk. His wife, Violet. 10 minutes later, she screamed. Not because of what I did, but because of what she was about to claim I did. The accusation came fast. The lie came faster. And then my phone wouldn't stop ringing. 56 calls. All in one day. But that's when everything changed. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. Now let's begin. My name is Adrian. I was a Navy SEAL for 12 years. You learn discipline in that world. How to stay calm when everything around you is falling apart. How to breathe through chaos. How to think when your body wants to panic. But nothing prepared me for what Violet was about to do. I worked for her husband, Dominic. He was a successful real estate developer. Old money, new connections, the kind of guy who made things happen in the city. I started as his executive assistant 5 years ago. Not because I needed the job. I had retirement money from my service. But I needed structure, purpose, something to do that wasn't about me. Dominic was the kind of boss who respected discipline. He saw my military background and never pushed too hard. We had an understanding. I did my job, I did it well, and he left me alone. That's all I wanted. His wife was different. Violet came from money too. Old family, older expectations. She was beautiful in that way that makes people nervous, the kind of beautiful that comes with sharp edges. I never liked being around her. Something felt off. The way she looked at people, like she was always calculating something. But I kept professional. Always professional. That's what training teaches you. That Tuesday morning, I arrived at Dominic's office building at 7:30 a.m., like always. He was already in meetings. I went to his private office on the top floor to organize his schedule and prepare his files. The morning sun was coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city looked clean from up there. Quiet. I was at his desk when I heard the elevator doors open. Violet walked in. She was wearing a white sundress, even though it was barely past sunrise. Her hair was down. She looked like she hadn't slept. For a second, I thought something was wrong. An emergency. A problem with Dominic. That's what I assumed. Morning, Violet. Everything okay? I asked, standing up, keeping distance. She didn't answer. She just walked past me and sat on the edge of Dominic's desk. Not in the chair. On the desk itself. Her legs were crossed. She was looking at me with that calculating expression again. Adrian, you've been working for my husband for a long time now, she said slowly. 5 years, I replied. I was already uncomfortable. This conversation wasn't normal. Is there something you need? She smiled. Not a real smile. The kind you use as a weapon. I need you to understand something. My husband trusts you. Maybe too much. She stood up and walked closer. I stepped back. Instinct. And I think you might be taking advantage of that trust. My chest went tight. I knew exactly where this was going. I'd heard stories like this. But stories weren't real until they became real. Violet, I think you should, no? You listen. She interrupted me, her voice suddenly sharp and angry. I know what you want. I've seen how you look at me. How you find excuses to be around when Dominic's at work. And I'm done pretending to ignore it. I didn't look at her anyway. I had barely been alone with her in the 5 years I worked for her husband. But I understood. This wasn't about truth. This was about something else entirely. And the moment I realized that, the moment I understood what was about to happen, I felt something shift inside me. Fear. Not for me. For what comes next. I think you should leave my husband's office, I said quietly. Professional. Calm. But my mind was already 3 steps ahead. She laughed. A cold sound that echoed off the glass walls. You think I'm leaving? No, Adrian. I'm staying right here. I'm going to scream. I'm going to scream so loud that Dominic hears me from the conference room 3 floors down. And I'm going to tell him exactly what you just did to me. What you just tried to do. My hands went cold. Everything I had learned in combat, everything I had learned about staying still in danger, it all kicked in. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched her. She took a breath. I could see her preparing herself, like an actor about to hit her mark. Then she screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of fury. Practiced. Controlled. The kind of scream that brings people running. Stop. Please. Stop. She was tearing at her own dress, creating scratches on her arms with her nails. My stomach dropped. I realized I was in the worst position possible, alone with her. In the early morning, no witnesses. Every second that passed made me look more guilty. Violet, stop. There are cameras. Shut up. You did this. You did this to me. She threw herself against the wall, hard enough to bruise her own shoulder. I watched it happen. I couldn't stop her. Any move I made would look like violence. That's when the office doors burst open. Security came first, then Dominic, then other employees. Violet was on the floor, crying, pointing at me with a shaking hand. Her dress was torn. Her arms had red marks. Her story was already written, and I was the villain in every version of it. She's lying, I said. My voice was steady, trained, but nobody was listening anymore. Dominic's face had gone white. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like the 5 years of trust had evaporated in the time it took for Violet to scream. Get him out of here, Dominic said to security. His voice was hollow. As they escorted me out, my phone started ringing. One call, then another, then another. By the time I reached my car in the parking garage, I had 16 missed calls. An hour later, 42. By the end of the day, 56. I didn't answer a single one, because I knew what was coming. The police, the lawyers, the court of public opinion. Everything I had built, my reputation, my quiet life, my dignity, was about to be destroyed by one lie. And the worst part? I had no idea why she had done it. Not yet. By 3 p.m. that same day, 2 police officers were waiting outside my apartment. I hadn't even reached my front door when I saw them. They were young, professional, but their eyes told me everything. They already believed her. Adrian Cole, one of them asked, even though he knew exactly who I was. Yes, I answered. We need you to come with us. We have a report of sexual assault filed against you this morning. Sexual assault. The words hung in the air like poison gas. I didn't resist. I didn't argue. I just went with them. That's what training teaches you. Don't make it worse. Don't give them a reason to be afraid of you. But the truth is, they were already afraid. And afraid people make dangerous decisions. The interrogation room at the precinct was exactly what you'd expect. Gray walls, metal table, a mirror that wasn't a mirror. 2 detectives across from me. No lawyer yet. I hadn't called one. I thought if I just explained what happened, they'd understand. I thought the truth would matter. I was wrong. Detective Harper was older, maybe 50. She had the look of someone who had heard 1,000 stories and believed none of them. Detective Colin was younger, aggressive in that way cops get when they think they've already solved the case. So you're telling us, Harper said, leaning back in her chair, that you didn't touch Violet Ashford at any point this morning? I didn't, I said. She came into the office. We exchanged maybe 30 seconds of conversation. Then she assaulted herself. Colin interrupted. His voice was sharp. She tore her own dress? Scratched her own arms? Yes, I said calmly. Because she needed it to look real. Why would she do that? Harper asked. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the folder in front of her. Violet's statement. Her injuries. Her story. I don't know yet, I admitted. And that was the truth. That was the part that terrified me most. I had no idea why she had decided to destroy me. But I know I didn't do it. Colin laughed, actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that made my jaw tighten. We have her testimony. We have photographs of her injuries. We have security footage showing you alone with her in that office. We have multiple witnesses who heard her screaming for you to stop. He was reading from a list now, like he was ordering from a menu. And we have a victim who's terrified of you. So forgive me if your word doesn't carry the same weight as all of that. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. Same questions, different angles. Where were you? What were you doing? Have you ever been alone with her before? Did you ever make comments about her appearance? Did anyone ever say you seemed interested in her? By the end, they had twisted everything. They had taken neutral facts and bent them into a confession I never made. My military background became combat training used to intimidate. My professionalism became calculated behavior to hide the truth. My 5 years of loyalty to Dominic became grooming the family for an opportunity. That's when I finally asked for a lawyer. The public defender they assigned me was named Preston. Older guy, tired, like he had already lost 1,000 cases and was preparing to lose one more. He met with me in a private room for maybe 20 minutes. Here's the problem, Preston said, not looking at me. Right now, it's her word against yours. And she has injuries. She has witnesses. She has a family backing her story. He paused. You have a military record that includes combat training and 0 civilian witnesses. There's security footage, I said. The cameras will show. The cameras show you two alone in an office. They don't show what happened between you. They don't show her attacking herself. All they show is you and her. And when a jury sees that tape, they're going to see what she wants them to see. I felt something break inside me then. Not my spirit, not my mind, but something fundamental about my belief in how the world worked. I had spent 12 years serving a system that was supposed to be just, and now that same system was designed to believe her. What do? I asked. We wait. We gather evidence. We find inconsistencies in her story, and we hope like hell that something breaks in our favor. Preston closed his folder. Until then, you're released on your own recognizance. Don't contact any witnesses. Don't contact the victim. And whatever you do, don't talk to anyone about this case. I was released that evening. By midnight, my apartment was surrounded by news vans. Somehow, the story had already leaked. And not as man accused of assault. It was Navy SEAL accused of raping boss's wife. The Navy SEAL part was supposed to make it more shocking, I guess. Like my training made me more dangerous. Like military service made me a predator. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages flooded in. Some from friends who immediately believed I was guilty. Some from people I barely knew, suddenly concerned for Violet's well-being. Some were threats. Promises of what they would do to me if they saw me on the street. I muted my phone and sat in the dark of my apartment. That's when I realized something. Violet had planned this perfectly. She had orchestrated every detail. The torn dress, the scratches, the screaming, it was all calculated. Which meant one thing. She didn't do this because she hated me. She did it because she needed something from me. Or more likely, she needed me out of the way. The question was why. I had no answers that night. Only questions. And 56 missed calls that kept ringing in my head like a ghost that wouldn't leave. By the next morning, 3 more women had come forward. They claimed I had made them uncomfortable at various points over the years. Their stories were vague, contradictory, and utterly fabricated. But it didn't matter. The narrative was already written. I was the villain, and the only way out was the truth. The only problem was, I still didn't know what the truth was. Preston wasn't going to cut it. I knew that within the first week. He was competent in the way that overworked public defenders are competent, enough to show up, not enough to win. So I hired a private attorney. Her name was Morgan Elliott. And she was exactly what I needed. Morgan was sharp in a way that made police officers nervous. She was in her late 40s, had been defending high-profile cases for 20 years, and had the kind of confidence that only comes from winning when everyone said you'd lose. She walked into our first meeting wearing a gray suit and carrying a leather folder that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Let's talk about what actually happened, she said, sitting across from me in her office. No small talk, no sympathy, just business. And I mean actually, not what you think happened, not what you wish had happened, the real timeline. I told her everything again, but this time, I paid attention to details I had glossed over before. The way Violet had been dressed, the specific words she used, her body language, the exact timing of when people arrived. Morgan listened without writing anything down. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. She's protecting something, Morgan said flatly. This isn't about you. This is about fear. Someone who's cornered and using the only weapon she thinks will work. That's what I've been thinking, I said. But what? What could she be protecting that's worth destroying someone's life? That's what we're going to find out. Morgan opened her folder. Inside were photographs, security footage stills, documents. I've already started pulling records. Violet married Dominic 8 years ago. Before that, she lived in 3 different cities in 4 years. That's not normal movement. That's either running from something or running toward something. She showed me the photographs. Violet at charity events. Violet at parties. Violet with various people I didn't recognize. In every photo, she had that same sharp expression, that calculated look. What about her family? I asked. Mother passed away when she was 12. Father's a retired financial advisor. They're close, but he's mostly out of the picture now. Lives overseas. Morgan flipped through more documents. But here's where it gets interesting. Violet's father was involved in some questionable business dealings about 15 years ago. Nothing criminal, but close. Securities violations, regulatory issues, settlements with the SEC. Why would that matter now? I asked. It matters because of this. Morgan pulled out a bank statement. Dominic's business has been struggling. Not obviously, not publicly, but the numbers don't lie. He's been hemorrhaging money for the past 2 years. And there's a series of large payments being made to accounts registered overseas. I looked at the statement. The numbers were in the millions. Steady, regular transfers. Monthly, like clockwork. What is he paying for? I asked. That, Morgan said, is the question. And my guess is Violet knows. Which is why she needed you gone. You were too close. Too observant. Maybe you saw something. Or maybe she just knew you were the type of person who would eventually notice something was wrong. Over the next 2 weeks, Morgan's investigators dug deeper. They found inconsistencies in Violet's statement. Small things. She claimed I touched her around 7:45 a.m., but the security footage showed her entering the office at 7:48. She said I made unwanted advances multiple times over the years, but then couldn't name a single specific incident. She claimed 3 witnesses heard her screaming for me to stop, but when Morgan interviewed those witnesses privately, their stories started to fall apart. One witness, a junior associate named Paige, admitted under pressure that she hadn't actually been in the office when it happened. She had just heard Violet screaming and assumed what everyone else was assuming. Another witness, a security guard named Hunter, suddenly became less certain about what he saw. When Morgan showed him the security footage and pointed out the timeline issues, he looked uncomfortable. Look, Hunter finally said, I just heard screaming and did my job. I didn't think about what was happening before I got there. The third witness never responded to Morgan's requests for an interview. But her investigator found out why. 2 days after filing her statement supporting Violet's account, she received a bank transfer for $50,000. A gift from an anonymous account. When Morgan traced it, the money came from a shell corporation registered to one of Dominic's business associates. That's when Morgan brought me back to her office with a stack of financial records. Your boss is bribing witnesses, Morgan said simply. Which means he knows Violet is lying. Which means he's in on this. The room seemed to tilt. I had worked for Dominic for 5 years. I had respected him. And all that time, he was paying people to corroborate a lie that would destroy me. Why would he do that? I asked, even though part of me already knew the answer. Because whatever is happening with his finances is worse than a sexual assault accusation, Morgan said. And he needs you completely discredited so that anything you might say about his business becomes the desperate words of a man trying to save himself. Morgan filed a motion to dismiss based on witness tampering. She submitted the bank records as evidence. She challenged the credibility of every person who had testified against me. And slowly, very slowly, the case started to crack. The prosecutor, a woman named Fiona, was aggressive at first. But when she realized that Dominic's team had been actively bribing witnesses, she knew she had a problem. Her case wasn't just weak, it was poisoned. 2 months after my arrest, The charges were reduced from felony assault to misdemeanor indecent conduct. Morgan immediately rejected the plea bargain. "We're not settling for anything," she told me. "We're fighting this to dismissal or acquittal. Because if we accept a reduced charge, it stays on your record. And that's what they want. They want you marked. They want you damaged." But here's what Morgan didn't tell me until later. The investigation into Violet's false accusation had uncovered something far bigger. Something that was about to blow the entire case open in ways that nobody had anticipated. Something that went back to Dominic's money, and where it was going, and who he was really paying to keep silent. Morgan called me on a Friday afternoon. Her voice was different. Tight. Like someone holding back something that wanted to explode. "We found something," she said. "I need you to come to my office." Now, when I arrived, Morgan was pacing. Her investigator, a quiet man named Quentin, was sitting at the conference table with his laptop open. On the screen were photographs of transactions, bank records, flight manifests, and something else, something that made my chest go cold. Military records. My military records. "Why do you have those?" I asked. "Because Violet requested them," Morgan said. "During the discovery process. She wanted your full service file. And when I asked her legal team why they needed something from 1993 to 2005, 12 years ago, they wouldn't answer." But Quentin dug deeper. Quentin turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a photograph of a woman. Early 50s. Middle Eastern features. She was standing next to a man I recognized from news reports. A man named Khalid. A man who had been connected to organized crime operations across 3 continents. "This is Amara Khalid," Quentin said quietly. "She's Violet's biological mother. Not the woman who raised her. The woman who gave birth to her." I stared at the photograph. Nothing made sense. "Violet's mother died when she was 12, I said. "I read that." "Violet's adoptive mother died," Morgan corrected. "The woman who raised her. But her biological mother was alive. And she was actively involved in money laundering operations for Khalid's organization." The room tilted again. I reached for a chair and sat down. "Violet was born Amara Khalid Jr." Quentin continued, pulling up more documents. "She was born into that world. But when Violet was 8 years old, Amara, her mother, made a deal. She turned state's evidence against Khalid's organization. In exchange, she and her daughter were placed in witness protection. New names, new identities, new lives. So Violet, I started, is in witness protection," Morgan finished. "And Dominic doesn't know. Or at least, he didn't know when they got married. But someone found out. Someone who knew who she really was. And that someone has been using that information to blackmail your boss for the past 2 years. The financial transfers. The millions of dollars leaving Dominic's accounts every month. It suddenly made sense. Dominic's been paying someone to keep Violet's identity secret," I said. "Exactly," Morgan said. "And when you were getting promoted to a higher position in his office, when you started accessing more sensitive information and spending more time with his family," Violet panicked. "She was afraid you'd find out. Or worse, she was afraid Dominic would tell you. So she decided to eliminate you as a threat. By accusing me of rape," I said flatly. "By creating a scenario where you'd be so damaged, so discredited, so focused on surviving a legal nightmare that you wouldn't be in any position to learn her secrets," Morgan said. "Or if you did learn them, no one would believe anything you said." I sat there processing this. The lie wasn't random. It was strategic. It was calculated by someone who understood exactly how to weaponize the legal system. "But there's more," Morgan said. She wasn't pacing anymore. She was standing very still. "Violet didn't just want you gone. She wanted to make sure you couldn't talk about what you might have discovered, which means she had to know what you knew, or what you might know." "I didn't know anything," I said. "I had no idea about her background." "But you had access to Dominic's financial records," Quentin said, pointing to another document. "As his executive assistant, you processed some of his business transactions. Nothing unusual on the surface. But 6 months ago, You flagged one of his accounts for review because the activity pattern seemed off. You didn't know why. You just thought it was strange. I remembered that. It was nothing. Just an inconsistency in his accounting. I had mentioned it to Dominic casually, and he had brushed it off. Said it was a legitimate business expense. You were right to be suspicious, Morgan said. That account was part of the blackmail payment system, and Violet knew you had looked at it. She was afraid of what you might eventually piece together. So she destroyed me to protect her secret, I said. Yes, Morgan said. But here's where this becomes dangerous for her. When we discovered her background through the discovery process, we also found something else. The person blackmailing Dominic? We have a name. And that name connects to something much bigger than just Violet's identity. Morgan pulled out another file. Inside was surveillance footage. It showed Dominic meeting with a man in a parking garage. The man was handing him an envelope. Thick, full of cash. That's Marcus, Quentin said, pointing to the man. Marcus Ashford, Violet's uncle. Her biological uncle, through her mother's side. He's a fixer. He works for organizations that need people to disappear, blackmail situations to be managed, loose ends to be tied up. He's been blackmailing his own niece's husband? I asked. He's been blackmailing Dominic to protect his niece, Morgan corrected. And when Violet got nervous about you, she probably told her uncle. And her uncle decided the easiest solution was to make you go away. But he couldn't do it directly. So he let Violet do it for him. Let her frame you. Let the system do the work. I stood up and walked to the window. From Morgan's office, I could see the city sprawling below. Millions of people, millions of lives. And somewhere in that city, Violet Ashford, or Amara Khalid Jr., or whatever her real name was probably feeling relieved. Probably thought she had won. What do we do? I asked. We have options, Morgan said. We can use this information to get the charges against you dismissed. We can expose Violet's background and destroy her credibility completely. We can hand over evidence of blackmail and organized crime connections to the FBI. Or, I asked, because I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Or, Morgan said slowly, we can use this information as leverage. We can make sure that what happened to you never happens again. We can make sure that Dominic faces real consequences. And we can make sure that Marcus understands that messing with innocent people has a cost. That's not justice, I said. That's revenge. No, Morgan said. Justice would be leaving you destroyed while people like Violet and Marcus walk free. Revenge would be ruining them. What I'm suggesting is something else. It's power. It's making sure they understand what they've done. It's ensuring they can't do it again. I turned away from the window. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had a choice. I could take the easy path and just get my life back. Or I could do something harder. Something that would change everything. Tell me the plan, I said. Morgan smiled. Not a warm smile. A sharp one. First, we file a countersuit against Violet for false accusation and malicious prosecution. Then we subpoena Marcus's financial records. And then we make them understand that lying about a Navy SEAL has consequences they never saw coming. The countersuit hit like a shockwave. Morgan filed it on a Monday morning. By noon, every lawyer connected to Violet's team was in panic mode. Because once we filed, we had the right to subpoena everything. Her phone records, her emails, her financial transactions, everything. Violet's legal team tried to block the subpoenas. They argued that her background was sealed and protected by the Witness Protection Program. But Morgan was ready for that. She had already contacted the federal prosecutors who had originally handled Violet's mother's case. And those prosecutors understood one thing clearly. Violet had initiated a false criminal accusation. That was a crime, and it had brought federal attention into a sealed case anyway. The feds weren't happy. Within a week, I got a call from a federal agent named Oliver. He wanted to meet. Just me. No lawyer. Not yet. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Oliver was in his 50s, tired, with the kind of eyes that had seen too much. He ordered black coffee and got straight to business. Here's what we know, Oliver said. not bothering with small talk. Violet Khalid, because that's her real name, Violet Khalid, was born into a criminal organization. Her mother turned state's evidence. We put them both in protection. Violet's lived clean since then. No arrests. No involvement in anything illegal. But she lied about you. And that changes things. What things? I asked. It means she's willing to commit federal crimes to protect her identity, Oliver said. Which means she's not as committed to staying clean as we thought. Which means we need to know what she's actually protecting. Because if she's willing to falsely accuse someone, what else is she willing to do? Her uncle, I said. Marcus. He's been blackmailing Dominic. Oliver nodded like he already knew that. Marcus is a problem we've been watching for 7 years, Oliver said. He works for organizations that traffic in information, blackmail, occasionally worse. We've never been able to pin anything on him that would stick. But now, with your case, we have leverage. We're going to use it. How? I asked. By making a deal, Oliver said. You cooperate with our investigation. You help us understand the blackmail scheme and how Violet's identity became a tool for extortion. And in exchange, the false accusation charges against you disappear. Completely. Federal intervention. No record. You walk clean. What about Violet? What about Dominic? I asked. That's between us and them, Oliver said. But I'll tell you this. Anyone who helps us will get a deal. Anyone who doesn't, won't. 2 days later, Dominic's lawyer called Morgan. He wanted to negotiate. Not with me. With the federal investigators. Dominic was willing to provide full documentation of every blackmail payment. Every threat. Every interaction with Marcus. Everything. In exchange, he wanted immunity from prosecution for being an accomplice in the false accusation. He claimed he didn't know Violet was lying. He claimed Marcus had threatened his family. He claimed he was a victim. But the emails told a different story. Quentin's team found the correspondence between Dominic and Violet. Emails discussing strategy. Emails where Dominic explicitly told Violet to make the accusation. Emails where he promised her that his legal team would destroy my credibility and I would be left with no way to defend myself. When Oliver showed me those emails, I felt something shift inside. It wasn't anger. I had moved past anger. It was clarity. Dominic had orchestrated this entire thing. Violet had been his tool, but he had been the architect. He's going to face charges, Oliver told me. Conspiracy, suborning perjury, maybe more. His immunity offer is off the table. Violet's team tried a different approach. They filed a motion claiming that her testimony and actions were protected because she was acting under duress. Because Marcus had threatened her. Because she was afraid. But the evidence didn't support that. The emails showed her volunteering the idea. The emails showed her excited about it. The emails showed her enjoying the fact that she was ruining someone's life. The federal prosecutor, a woman named Natalie with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, saw right through it. She knew exactly what she was doing. Natalie told me during a meeting at the federal courthouse. She made a calculated choice to destroy you. And now she's trying to rewrite the narrative to make herself the victim. It won't work. The plea offer that came next was brutal. Violet had to choose between going to trial on multiple counts, filing a false report, conspiracy, malicious prosecution, or accepting a deal. The deal meant admitting guilt and serving federal time. Not a lot of time. Maybe 18 months in a minimum security facility. But it meant a felony record. It meant admitting publicly that she had lied. Her legal team fought it for weeks. They argued that her identity was still at risk. They argued that publicity would expose her background. They argued that prison time was excessive for a false accusation. But none of that mattered anymore. Because once the feds got involved, Violet's secrets stopped being secrets. The courtroom proceedings were sealed, but the facts were already out. Violet Khalid, born into a criminal family, protected by the government, and now facing federal charges for weaponizing that protection. The day before the trial was supposed to begin, Violet's lawyer called Morgan with an update. Violet was accepting the plea deal. She would plead guilty. She would serve her time. And she would issue a public apology admitting that the sexual assault accusation was false. I don't know what changed her mind. Fear of trial, fear of prison, fear of her entire life being exposed in open court. But whatever it was, she finally understood that the lie had reached its limit. The day she pleaded guilty, I sat in the courtroom. I wasn't required to be there, but I needed to be. I needed to see her admit it. I needed to hear those words come out of her mouth. When the judge asked her if she understood the charges and the consequences, Violet's voice was small, broken, nothing like the sharp, calculated person who had screamed in that office months ago. I do, she said. And you're entering a guilty plea? The judge asked. Yes, Violet said. I falsely accused Adrian Cole of sexual assault. It wasn't true. It was never true. I did it to protect myself. And I'm sorry. Those last 3 words, I'm sorry, they didn't fix anything. They didn't give me back the months of my life that had been destroyed. They didn't undo the public humiliation or the fear or the nights I spent wondering if I would end up in prison for something I never did. But they were an acknowledgement, a breaking of the lie. And sometimes, that's all you get. The day after Violet's plea, the federal investigation into Dominic's finances went public. Not by choice, by necessity. Once the plea deal was sealed, the government had no reason to keep it quiet anymore. And they didn't care about protecting Dominic's reputation. The headlines were brutal. Prominent developer orchestrated false sexual assault accusation. Real estate executive caught in blackmail scheme. Federal charges filed against Dominic Ashford. But there was something else in those headlines that caught my attention. Something bigger than Violet's lie. Something that made me realize why Dominic had been so desperate in the first place. The money he had been paying wasn't just blackmail. It was embezzlement. Federal investigators had traced it back to his company's pension fund. Money that belonged to hundreds of employees. Money that Dominic had been systematically stealing and funneling through shell corporations. The total came to $47 million. When I read that number, everything clicked into place. Violet's accusation wasn't just about protecting her secret. It was about buying time. It was about keeping me distracted and discredited while Dominic moved money and destroyed evidence. It was about using a false accusation against me to create chaos that would cover a much larger crime. Morgan called me that afternoon. They're coming after Dominic with everything, she said. Wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and now, conspiracy to commit perjury and file a false accusation. He's facing 25 years minimum. What about his company? I asked. Dissolved. His assets are frozen. The pension fund is being restored from his personal holdings, but most of his wealth is tied up in the business. Employees who lost their pensions are going to get maybe 50 cents on the dollar. I thought about the people who worked at Dominic's company. Hundreds of them. People who had trusted him. People who had worked for him for years, believing their retirement was secure, and he had stolen from them. He had taken their future and gambled it away or hidden it in offshore accounts. And then he had tried to destroy me to keep that secret. 2 weeks later, I received a subpoena to testify. Not as a victim, as a witness. The federal prosecutors wanted me to detail every financial transaction I had processed for Dominic. Every inconsistency I had noticed. Everything that had seemed off. I spent 3 days preparing with Natalie, the federal prosecutor. We went through hundreds of documents, transactions, communications. She was building a case that would prove Dominic had been systematically stealing from his company for years, that he had used Violet's blackmail situation as leverage to accelerate the theft, and that when he realized I might start asking questions, he had orchestrated the false accusation to eliminate me as a problem. The trial was set for 6 months out, but before that could happen, something unexpected occurred. Marcus, Violet's uncle, disappeared. One day, he was in a federal holding cell awaiting trial on blackmail charges. The next day, he was gone. Not escaped. The prison confirmed he had been transferred. To where, they wouldn't say. Federal agencies got involved. Questions were asked, but no one had answers. Oliver called me personally. Marcus is in protective custody, he said. We moved him. Why? I asked. Because he was going to be killed in that holding cell, Oliver said flatly. He owed money to people, dangerous people, and they wanted him silenced. So we moved him to a secure facility. We're using him as a witness against higher-level operators. In exchange, he disappears into the system. So he's getting away with it, I said. No, Oliver said. He's going to spend the rest of his life in protective custody. He'll never walk free again, never see daylight, never have a normal life. That's not getting away with it. That's just a different kind of prison. 2 months before Dominic's trial, his legal team tried one final move. They approached Morgan with an offer. Dominic would plead guilty to the financial crimes. He would cooperate fully with federal investigators. He would accept prison time. But in exchange, the charges related to the false accusation against me would be reduced. He would serve his time, but wouldn't face the conspiracy counts. Morgan brought the offer to me. It's your decision, she said. You can accept it and know he'll spend maybe 10 years in prison for the embezzlement. Or you can reject it and let the case go to trial. If we win, he'll face 25 years. If we lose. She didn't finish the sentence. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the anger I should have felt, the rage, the desire for maximum punishment. But what I actually felt was something different. I felt tired. I felt empty. Let him take the deal, I said finally. But only if he has to publicly admit, under oath, that he orchestrated the false accusation against me. I want it on the record. I want it clear to everyone that he lied. Morgan smiled. I can make that happen, she said. 3 weeks later, Dominic stood in federal court and admitted it. He admitted that he had asked Violet to make the false accusation. He admitted that he had instructed his legal team to destroy my reputation. He admitted that he had done it to distract from the pension fund theft. And then the judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. As Dominic was led away, he looked at me. Our eyes met for just a second. And in that second, I saw something I hadn't expected to see. I saw a man who understood, finally, that he had lost everything. Not because of what I had done, but because of what he had done. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Dominic's chains as he was escorted out. That night, my name was in the news again. But this time, it wasn't as the accused. It was as the man who had survived the lie. The Navy SEAL who had been targeted by his own boss and hadn't broken. Dozens of media outlets wanted interviews. Publishers wanted book deals. Everyone wanted to know what it felt like. But I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to relive it. I just wanted to move forward. What I didn't know was that moving forward meant confronting something much harder than the trial had been. It meant facing what all of this had done to me on the inside. It meant understanding that even though the truth had won, I was still carrying the weight of the lie. And that weight, I was about to discover, was far from over. 6 weeks after Dominic's sentencing, I was called back to federal court. Not for a trial, for a hearing. Oliver wouldn't tell me why. He just said I needed to be there. When I arrived, Natalie was waiting for me in a conference room. She looked different. Not tired. Angry. We found something, she said. And I wanted you to hear it from me before it becomes public. She opened a laptop. On the screen was a bank account. But not just any account. A personal account. In Dominic's name. But there was something else. A co-signer. Someone with equal access and equal authority. The name on the account was Dominic Ashford and Felix Morrison. Felix? I asked. I didn't recognize the name. Felix Morrison, Natalie said slowly. Dominic's business partner. The person who runs his company's day-to-day operations. I remembered Felix. I had met him a handful of times. A thin man in his 60s with silver hair and expensive suits. He had always been quiet during meetings. Always in the background. What about him? I asked. He's not just a partner, Natalie said. He's the architect of the entire embezzlement scheme. Dominic was the figurehead. Felix was the one running it. And it goes back much further than we thought. 15 years. Since before you even worked for Dominic. Natalie pulled up more documents. Financial records. Communications. A whole network of shell corporations and offshore accounts. Felix has been moving money through Dominic's company for a decade and a half, Natalie continued. But it's not just embezzlement. We traced some of the money flows. Some of it connects to organized crime. Some of it connects to political corruption. Some of it connects to things we don't even have names for yet. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because when we tried to arrest Felix, he was gone, Natalie said. He fled the country. We have federal agents at airports. We have Interpol involved. But right now, we don't know where he is. The room seemed to spin. This entire time, I had thought Dominic was the criminal mastermind. But he had just been a puppet. Someone else had been pulling the strings all along. There's more, Natalie said. She didn't sound angry anymore. She sounded frustrated. When we went through Felix's communications, we found emails between him and someone else. Someone he was working with to ensure that certain information never came to light. Who? I asked. Natalie hesitated. For the first time since I'd known her, the prosecutor seemed uncertain. Violet's father, Natalie said quietly. Violet's adoptive father. The man who raised her after her biological mother went into witness protection. I felt my stomach drop. What? I said. Violet's father was involved with Felix, Natalie said. They were using Violet's background, her connections to organized crime through her biological mother, as leverage. They were offering information about witness protection protocols to Felix's criminal associates, selling secrets that could endanger people in the program. Violet was part of this. I asked, horrified. We don't think so, Natalie said. At least not intentionally. We think her father was using her. Using the fact that she was adopted and knew sensitive information about the protection program. But when you started asking questions about Dominic's finances, Felix got worried. He told Violet's father, who told Violet to do something drastic to get you away from the situation. The betrayal hit me in waves. I had been caught in the middle of something far more complex than I had understood. This wasn't just about Dominic's theft. This wasn't just about Violet's secret. This was about a network of corruption that stretched across multiple agencies, multiple continents, and multiple organizations. What happens now? I asked. Now we find Felix, Natalie said. And we protect the people in witness protection whose information he may have compromised. And we have to make a difficult decision about Violet. What decision? I asked. Violet's father is under investigation for selling information to criminals, which makes Violet's situation complicated. She's still under protection, but her family is now a security threat. We have to decide whether to move her, change her identity again, or, Natalie paused, or whether she becomes a witness against her own father. 2 days later, I received a call from Violet. Her voice was different, not calculated, not sharp, broken. I didn't know, she said immediately. I need you to understand that. I didn't know what my father was doing. I didn't know he was selling information. I didn't know any of it. Why are you calling me? I asked. Because the federal prosecutors said I could, Violet said. And because I need to tell you something. I need to tell you why I did it. Why I accused you. I didn't want to listen, but I did anyway. My father called me that morning, Violet said. He told me that someone had been looking into our family's finances. He said that you had been digging, that you had questions. He was panicked. He told me I needed to do something to make you go away, to discredit you. He said if I didn't, we would all be exposed. So you destroyed me, I said flatly. I panicked, Violet said. I was terrified. I had spent my whole life hiding who I was. And suddenly, it felt like everything was about to collapse. My father made it sound like you were a threat, like you were going to expose us. And I believed him. He was right, I said. I would have exposed you. Because your father was committing crimes. I know that now, Violet said. The federal prosecutors explained it to me. My father wasn't trying to protect our family. He was trying to protect himself. He was using me as a shield. And when that didn't work, he disappeared. Where is he? I asked. I don't know, Violet said. The last communication from him was 2 days after I accused you. He told me to stay strong and not to talk to anyone. Then he vanished. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment. I realized something that I had been avoiding for months. The system had failed me not once, but twice. Once when Violet had lied, and once when the people who were supposed to protect me had almost allowed an innocent man to be imprisoned. But more than that, I realized that everyone around me had been trapped. Violet was trapped by her father's crimes. Dominic was trapped by Felix's scheme. Felix was hiding from consequences he had created. Even Marcus, Violet's uncle, was trapped in protective custody. We had all been caught in a web we didn't fully understand. And the only difference was that I had survived it intact. I hadn't broken. I hadn't confessed to something I didn't do. I hadn't become complicit in the lies. That night, Oliver called me. "We found Felix," he said, "in Brazil. We're working on extradition." "What about Violet's father?" I asked. "Still looking," Oliver said. "But Adrian, I wanted you to know something. When this is all over, when all the trials are done and all the convictions are final, you should know that your military training saved you. Most people would have broken under that kind of pressure. Most people would have confessed to anything just to make it stop. But you didn't. You stayed steady. You stayed honest. That matters." After he hung up, I thought about what Oliver had said. About staying steady. About staying honest. About not breaking even when everything around you is designed to make you break. I had survived. But survival, I was learning, wasn't the same as healing. The media explosion came 3 months later. All at once. Every news outlet, every newspaper, every investigative journalist who had been following the case suddenly had access to classified details that the federal government released strategically. The headline was unavoidable: multi-million-dollar corruption network exposed. Real estate executive, federal employee among those charged. But what made the story explode was the revelation that went beyond just Dominic and Felix. The investigation had uncovered that Violet's adoptive father, a man named Grant, had been selling witness protection information to organized crime networks for over a decade. He had compromised at least 7 protected witnesses. 2 of them were now dead. The story spiraled. News networks brought in experts. Analysts broke down the financial flows. Reporters dug into the family histories. Violet's dual identity became public knowledge. Her biological connection to organized crime became tabloid fodder. Her false accusation against me became the lens through which the entire scandal was viewed. And suddenly, I was everywhere. Every news cycle had my face. Every analysis mentioned me. I was the Navy SEAL falsely accused. I was the innocent man caught in the corruption web. I was the sympathetic protagonist in a story that had become national news. But being the protagonist in someone else's story isn't the same as being free. My apartment became impossible to live in. Journalists camped outside. Every time I went to buy groceries, someone recognized me. Some people wanted to shake my hand and tell me I was brave. Others wanted to know if I was going to sue. Everyone wanted something from me. Morgan called and strongly suggested I leave the city. She had settled my case with Dominic's company. They were paying me a substantial settlement, compensation for lost wages, legal fees, and emotional distress. The number was in the millions. Enough to change my life. Enough to never have to work again. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like compensation for something that couldn't be compensated. I rented a cabin in the mountains, 2 hours away from the city. Minimal contact with anyone. I just wanted silence and space to process what had happened. That's where the breakdown happened. It started small. I couldn't sleep. I would lie awake at night, replaying conversations, analyzing moments I had missed, wondering what I could have done differently. I had survived the accusation, survived the trial, survived the media circus, but I couldn't survive the quiet. One night, I sat on the cabin porch and realized something dark was happening inside me. I was thinking about Violet, not with anger, with something worse, with the understanding that her life was destroyed now. Violet's identity had been exposed. Her career was over. Her marriage to Dominic had ended in divorce. She had served her federal time and been released, but she would carry this for the rest of her life. And Felix Felix was extradited and facing 40 years in prison. He had built a comfortable life on corruption, and now it was gone. Even Dominic. Even though he deserved the consequence, part of me understood that he was also a victim of Felix's schemes. He had been manipulated just like I had been manipulated. I realized that getting justice, real justice, doesn't feel like victory. It just feels like everyone loses. Morgan came to the cabin to check on me. She found me sitting in the dark, not moving, just staring at nothing. "You need to talk to someone," she said without preamble. "A therapist, a counselor, someone." "I don't want to talk," I said. "I want to forget." "You can't forget," Morgan said. "So you might as well process it." I found a therapist named Dr. Ryder. He was older, probably in his 70s, and had worked with veterans for decades. He understood trauma in a way that civilians couldn't. He understood what it meant to survive something that was designed to destroy you. The problem with surviving injustice, Dr. Ryder told me during our first session, is that surviving doesn't erase what happened. Your body remembers. Your mind remembers. And you have to decide what to do with that memory. Over the next few months, I worked through the trauma, not by forgetting, but by understanding, by accepting that what happened to me wasn't my fault and wasn't my responsibility to fix. 6 months after leaving the city, I made a decision. I was going to break my silence. I was going to speak publicly about what had happened, not for revenge, not for sympathy, but to warn others, to help people understand that false accusations are weapons, that the legal system can be manipulated, that innocent people can be destroyed by lies. I did an interview with a major news outlet. I told the entire story, from the moment Violet walked into Dominic's office to the moment I finally understood why she had done it. I talked about the fear, the humiliation, the loss of identity. I talked about what it's like to be stripped of your reputation in minutes. But I also talked about something else. I talked about the people who had destroyed me, and I talked about them with compassion. Violet was a victim, I said in the interview. She was trapped by her circumstances and manipulated by people she trusted. Dominic was a victim too. He was caught between his own greed and the schemes of people he worked with. None of that excuses what they did to me, but it explains it. The interviewer looked surprised by that answer. Most people wanted me to rage. They wanted me to demand maximum punishment. They wanted me to be consumed by hatred. But I had learned something in those quiet months in the cabin. Hatred doesn't hurt the people you hate. It only hurts you. After the interview aired, something shifted. The national conversation about my case changed. It stopped being about revenge. It started being about understanding. People began asking harder questions about how the legal system had almost failed, how an innocent person could be so easily targeted, how systems designed to protect us could be weaponized. Violet reached out to me. She wanted to apologize in person. I almost said no, but Dr. Ryder suggested I do it. We met in a public place, a coffee shop. Violet looked different than she had in court. Smaller, older, like the lie had aged her. "I don't know if you can ever forgive me," Violet said quietly, "but I want you to know that I understand what I did. I understand how close I came to destroying your life completely." "I know," I said, "and I understand why you did it." "That doesn't make it right," Violet said. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't, but it makes it human. And that's what I've learned. Everything that happened to me wasn't some evil plot by monsters. It was people making terrible choices under pressure, choices that rippled out and hurt others." Violet cried, not dramatically, just quietly, like someone who had finally stopped running from what she had done. When we left the coffee shop, Violet asked me one question. "Do you think you'll ever truly forgive me?" I thought about it honestly. "I don't know," I said, "but I think I can forgive what happened. I think I can accept it as part of my story without letting it define me. And maybe that's enough." A year passed, then another. The legal system had run its course. Dominic was serving his 15-year sentence in a federal prison upstate. Felix had been extradited and was facing 40 years. Violet had been released after serving her time and had moved to another state to start over under a new identity. Grant, Violet's adoptive father, had never been found. He had disappeared into whatever network had been protecting him. Justice, if you could call it that, had been served. But I was learning that real healing had nothing to do with courtrooms or verdicts. Real healing happened in the quiet moments. In the mornings when I woke up and didn't immediately think about Violet's scream. In the evenings when I could drive past a coffee shop without remembering the moment I realized my boss had orchestrated my destruction. I had left the city permanently. I bought a small house on the edge of a rural area, away from everyone and everything that reminded me of what I had lost. I wasn't hiding. I was just reclaiming my life in a way that made sense to me. Dr. Ryder had told me something during one of our last sessions that stuck with me. He said, "You survived because you didn't break your own code. Even when the system tried to force you to confess, even when your boss tried to destroy you, even when everyone around you was lying, you stayed true to yourself." That's not just survival. That's integrity. I thought about that a lot. I started volunteering with a veterans organization, helping other people who had come back from war and were struggling to find their place in civilian life. It felt right. It felt like taking something that had tried to destroy me and using it to help others. One day, about 18 months after everything had ended, I received a letter. The return address was from a federal prison. I almost didn't open it, but I did. It was from Dominic. The letter was handwritten. His handwriting was different than I remembered. Shakier. Less controlled. "Adrian, I've been in here for 18 months. I have 26 more years to go. I spend most of my time thinking about decisions I made. How each decision led to the next. How one choice to embezzle money eventually led to me telling my wife to accuse you of rape. I want you to know that wasn't me thinking clearly. That wasn't me being rational. That was me being desperate and stupid and willing to destroy an innocent person to save myself. You were loyal to me. You worked hard for me. You asked for nothing but to do your job well. And I repaid that by trying to destroy you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to even care about this letter. But I needed to tell you that I understand now what I did. And I'm sorry. Dominic, I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it away. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. Dominic's apology wasn't for me. It was for himself. It was part of his own healing process. But I understood it. And that understanding was enough. Meanwhile, Felix was in a maximum security prison fighting extradition appeals. His case was moving through the courts slowly. He was claiming that he had been following Dominic's orders, that he was just an employee, that he wasn't the architect of anything. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, communications, testimonies from people he had worked with. Felix was going to spend a long time in prison. And then there was Marcus, Violet's uncle. He remained in protective custody, living in a secure federal facility, unable to contact anyone outside. His life had essentially ended the moment he chose to become a criminal. He had traded his freedom for the illusion of power. And when that illusion shattered, there was nothing left. I thought about Marcus sometimes, about how his choices had rippled through so many lives, how his blackmail scheme had triggered everything else, how one person's decision to commit a crime had set off a chain reaction that had touched dozens of people. It made me understand something important. Betrayal isn't always about grand schemes and calculated moves. Sometimes it's just about small choices, small decisions to lie, small decisions to prioritize yourself over others, small decisions to compromise your integrity. And those small decisions compound until they become catastrophic. On the 2-year anniversary of the day Violet accused me, I sat on my porch and reflected on everything that had happened. I had lost my job. I had lost my reputation temporarily. I had lost my sense of security in the system. But I had gained something too. I had gained clarity about who I was. I had gained the knowledge that I could survive betrayal. I had gained the understanding that integrity matters. The 56 missed calls that had started this nightmare had long since faded away, but they had transformed into something else. They had become a symbol. They represented panic. They represented fear. They represented the moment when everything I thought was stable suddenly became unstable. But I had survived it. And that survival had taught me that stability isn't something external. It's not about your job or your reputation or your circumstances. Stability is internal. It's about knowing who you are and staying true to that even when everything around you is designed to make you break. I received occasional updates about what was happening to everyone involved. Violet was living quietly in another state, working in a nonprofit, trying to rebuild her life. Her biological mother, the one who had started this entire cascade of events by turning state's evidence decades ago, had died peacefully of natural causes. In a way, her death closed a circle. The original crime that had set all of this in motion had finally ended. Grant's disappearance remained unsolved. Federal investigators had theories, but no proof. He had simply vanished into whatever underworld he had connections to. In my darker moments, I imagined he was dead. In my more hopeful moments, I imagined he was living in fear, always looking over his shoulder, always knowing that his crimes would eventually catch up with him. Morgan, my lawyer, had become something like a friend. We would occasionally have coffee and talk about the case. She had gone on to become something of a celebrity in legal circles. She won 3 major cases in the 2 years after mine, all of them involving false accusations or corrupted justice systems. You changed how I practice law, she told me during one of our meetings. You taught me that defending innocent people isn't just about winning in court. It's about holding up a mirror to the system and showing people where it fails. You made me better at my job. I didn't know what to say to that. I hadn't wanted to teach anyone anything. I had just wanted to survive and move on. But maybe that's what happens when you refuse to break. Maybe that's what happens when you stay true to yourself even when the entire world is telling you to confess to something you didn't do. You become a lesson. You become a symbol. You become proof that integrity still matters. 3 years had passed. I was standing in front of a group of 30 people, high school students. They were part of a legal awareness program. They wanted to hear from me about what it's like to be falsely accused, what it's like to watch the system that's supposed to protect you try to destroy you instead. I looked at their faces, young, uncertain. Some of them were probably dealing with their own injustices. Some of them probably didn't believe the system could fail them so completely. All of them were about to learn. The hardest part wasn't the accusation, I told them. It wasn't even the trial. The hardest part was learning to trust again, learning to believe that there was goodness in a system that had tried to consume me, learning to see people as individuals instead of threats. A girl in the back raised her hand. Do you ever think about revenge? She asked. Like, do you ever fantasize about hurting the people who hurt you? I paused before answering, because the truth was complicated. Yes, I said honestly. I did, for a long time. But I learned something important. Revenge doesn't heal you. It just spreads the damage around. It just makes more victims. So instead of revenge, I chose something harder. I chose to move forward. I chose to help people. I chose to prove that what they tried to do to me doesn't define who I am. After the presentation, a boy approached me. He was maybe 16, nervous, like he had something he needed to tell someone, but didn't know how. My sister was falsely accused of stealing, he said quietly, from her school, and everyone believed it. And now she won't go to school anymore. She won't leave the house. And my parents don't know how to help her. I gave him Morgan's contact information. I told him to reach out. I told him that his sister wasn't alone. That night, I received a message from an unknown number. At first, I thought about ignoring it, but something made me open it. It was a video, security footage. It showed a man in his 60s, thin, with gray hair, walking through an airport terminal. The timestamp was from yesterday. The location was Singapore. It was Grant, Violet's adoptive father. Someone had found him, and they had sent me the proof. The next morning, I called Oliver. We saw it. Oliver said before I could even say anything. Interpol is working with Singapore authorities. We're moving to arrest him. He's been running for 3 years. It's time for him to stop. 2 weeks later, Grant was extradited back to the United States. He faced charges for selling witness protection information, conspiracy, and money laundering. His trial was set for 6 months out. But I didn't wait for it. I had learned my lesson about living in courtrooms and trials. I had moved on, and I was going to stay moved on. What I did do was something different. I started writing. Stories about betrayal. Stories about corruption. Stories about what happens when the system fails. Stories about people who survive and rebuild. I wasn't writing to make people angry. I was writing to make people understand. To make people think. To make people see that justice isn't always about punishment. It's about understanding. My first book was about my own case. Unfiltered. Raw. Everything that happened from my perspective. When it was published, it became a bestseller. Not because people wanted revenge fantasy, but because people wanted truth. People wanted to understand what it really felt like. Morgan texted me when the book hit the bestseller list. You did it. You took your pain and turned it into something that helps people. That's the real victory. But the most unexpected thing happened 6 months after the book was published. Violet reached out again. She had read the book, and she wanted to do something with me. I want to write my story, Violet said when we met. I want to explain what it was like to be trapped by my circumstances. I want people to understand that I wasn't just a villain. I was someone who made terrible choices under impossible pressure. I want redemption, but I also want accountability. We worked together on her story. It took months. It was painful for both of us. But when it was finished, it was honest. It was real. It showed the complexity of her situation without making excuses for what she had done. Her book came out a year later, and something remarkable happened. People didn't hate her. People understood her. And more importantly, people began to see the entire situation differently. They saw it not as a simple story of good and evil, but as a story about how circumstances and choices intersect to create tragedy. Violet's book sold almost as well as mine. And then something even more unexpected happened. A film producer optioned both stories. They wanted to make a documentary that told the full story. Both perspectives. Both sides. The film came out 18 months later. It won awards. It sparked conversations about witness protection, about corruption, about false accusations, about the legal system. It became required viewing in law schools. But for me, the most important moment came during the premiere. I was sitting in the theater. Violet was sitting 3 rows behind me. Neither of us had planned to sit near each other. But after the film ended, she came and sat down next to me. We didn't say anything for a long time. We just sat there in the darkness of an empty theater, 2 people who had destroyed each other and somehow found a way to rebuild something that wasn't quite friendship, but wasn't quite anything else either. I read an interview you did last week, Violet said finally, where you talked about forgiveness. Yeah, I said. You said you don't think forgiveness means forgetting, Violet said. You said it means accepting what happened and choosing to move forward anyway. That's what I believe, I said. I forgive you, Violet said quietly. I turned to look at her. For what? I didn't do anything to you. For surviving, Violet said. For not breaking. For refusing to let what I did destroy you completely. I was afraid you were going to spend the rest of your life angry. And I'm glad you didn't. Because if you had, that would have meant my lie won. That would have meant I destroyed you after all. But you didn't let that happen. We left the theater separately. But something had shifted. The circle was finally closing. Now, 3 years later, I run a nonprofit organization. We help people who have been falsely accused. We help them navigate the legal system. We help them rebuild their lives. We help them understand that surviving injustice is possible, that moving forward is possible. Violet works with us too. She handles communications and victim support. We don't work in the same room, but we work toward the same goal. Morgan recently told me something. She said, "You know what the most powerful thing about your story is? It's not the accusation. It's not the trial. It's what you did after. It's that you chose to help people instead of destroy them. That's what makes people listen to you." I think about those 56 missed calls sometimes. I think about the terror of that day. I think about how close I came to breaking. But I also think about how I survived it. How I came out the other side not just intact, but transformed. And now, I want to ask you something. Before this story ends, I need to know. Where are you watching from? What's your city? Your country? I want to know who's listening. And more importantly, I want to know what kind of stories you want to hear next. Do you want more betrayal stories? More stories about corruption? Do you want revenge narratives where justice finally comes through? Or do you want stories about redemption? Stories about people who make mistakes and find their way back to integrity? Comment below and tell me. Tell me your city. Tell me the kind of stories that grip you. Tell me what makes you come back for more. Because I'm creating content specifically for you. And your feedback matters. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next thriller, the next epic revenge story, the next jaw-dropping betrayal tale that will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last second. I promise you this. Every story I bring you will have a clear ending, a satisfying resolution. No loose ends, no confusion, just pure, emotional, gripping storytelling. The 56 missed calls that started my nightmare became my awakening. And now, years later, I understand that some of the worst things that happen to us can become the catalyst for becoming better versions of ourselves. This is where my story ends. But your story, your journey, that's just beginning. Choose wisely. Choose with integrity. Choose to be the kind of person who survives betrayal without becoming bitter. Choose to be the kind of person who helps others instead of hurting them. Because that's what real strength is. Not the ability to destroy, but the ability to heal.